Thank you for joining us and not being outside drinking coffee and eating cake. So I have a list of questions. Let's see if we can get through them all. Let's try and keep it simple for these folks. But the first question I had is, why are we still here talking about cloud? I was here 4 years ago, introduced the subject of we've just moved to the cloud, all SaaS, all cloud, we've just launched Stars Play. And I find myself here again talking about cloud, and we're going to have to talk from the beginning again. Because walking around the room this morning, people were still hesitant to move things to the cloud. So what are we doing? What isn't on the cloud for you guys? Or what is? I don't know where to start. So Adrian, why don't you try and explain to us what, from a broadcast perspective from NBC, have you moved to the cloud that was once on-prem?
Well, of course, because we're in Dubai, we love talking about clouds in general, especially this week, because there's so little of them. I think the strange effect for us has been because you guys are completely digital first. As a more traditional broadcaster, then getting into VOD, the VOD part, Shahid, is pretty much a digital startup within a traditional broadcaster. So to us, one of the first things I started doing 8 years ago when I joined NBC was looking at, okay, get rid of the servers. They were hosted servers, but still, get rid of the servers, move into cloud. So from the Shahid perspective, everything is cloud. There's no doubt we don't really want to run any of our own hardware. That's not a core strength. That's not where we're adding value. We leave this to the people who are professionals at this and they have the huge data centers with all the kind of facilities we couldn't possibly do. But then, of course, we're also still relying on this broadcast workflow. So there's this weird shift where basically it's coming from the end user on a digital device or on a television, and slowly the part you can put in cloud is shifting towards studios, where it's the other extreme. And everything in between, you slowly start evaluating, okay, which parts are ready to start moving in there. So we very quickly reached a point where, okay, the entire digital infrastructure is on cloud. But then oddly, even for Shahid, we're running some hardware encoders sitting in a data center here in the NBC building. So we want to get rid of those as well.
And what is that specifically? Can you give us an example of what that is? That's sitting on-prem that you want to move into the cloud?
I think the thing I would love for broadcast tech to start moving into cloud is the archives. So we can actually run analytics on it. We can use AI and ML to actually extract metadata from it, enrich it, make it easier for us to reuse and find back, but also then start reusing it within the broadcast workflows.
But how often do you go into those archives to pull things out?
Well, if you're looking at a room full of tapes, not a lot. So yeah. That's exactly the point. So more and more of these things need to become much more flexible and accessible, and it also needs to be affordable to do so. So slowly those things are starting to move there, but the big problem remains latency and bandwidth cost in this region.
We're going to come to that. For us, you want to give us some examples of what has gone into the cloud?
Absolutely. So for us, it's a bit different. We started out of cloud, and because we just started off like 5 years back, and that time cloud was started to get mature. So one of the things that we initially had was started off with the workflow, the content processing. How are we going to do it? We had a couple of options where we should be doing this on-prem, or should we do this over the cloud? And if we do this on-prem, do we have enough resource pool available, which is one of the main bottleneck when it comes to on-prem solutions. So for us to get all the workflows done and on time, and so that we can launch with the decent amount of library with our service. So we went off with the cloud. And
was there a resource constraint there? Were we able to find people with the right skills for cloud?
Yeah, I mean, because when you're doing these kind of intensive workflows, you need a lot of elasticity when it comes to adopting the compute and getting your workflows done with a short span of time, rather than waiting for all of them to get that done and then packaging and then distribution. So one of the bottleneck what we observed as well initially, where we started off something on the on-prem, and then immediately we found it's not going to work, because first our studios, all the broadcasters are sitting in US and in Europe, and for them to get their content delivered to us over Aspera or Signient, that's one of the bottlenecks, because they were taking a lot of time. Then later on, once we have the content ingested, now let's transcode and package it, and that's another kind of bottleneck we had. Like we would not be able to achieve on-prem. So this is the reason why we went completely out of cloud approach, where we shift all of our workloads when it comes to content operations towards cloud, getting it done within a couple of months, and we had like a decent amount of library to launch with.
What about actual talent and resources? So people here were more from the broadcast world. What kind of steps did we take to bring cloud savvy or cloud first people in, or did we? I can't remember now. Did we find those people straight away, or did we train them? And is that a big step? Because people here want to get to the cloud, but they've got broadcast engineers, right? So what would be the steps for them to retrain, I guess?
Yeah.
Better word.
So I'll try to give an honest answer. So it was very tough for us to have those kind of skills to understand this kind of transformation when it comes to on-prem towards cloud, because the mindset was completely stuck towards, okay, we can have our own private cloud sitting in our own data centers, and we can run off things over here. But so what we did, we took actually two approaches. We had a couple of resources where those are completely off the on-prem kind of skills, skill sets. But we also had some transformation guys where they helped them not only to engage towards the cloud migration, but also getting them on the pace where that's the way it should be, and that's how the future is going to be. Because you can't run off everything over on-prem, especially when this kind of intensive workloads. And this is just one of the examples I'm giving you. There are many others where you have to run your billing batches, where your ETL processes, because you need a lot of compute. Although they are completely offline processes, but still you need elasticity. And how can you achieve those kind of elasticities within like a limited resource pools that you have been having in your data centers?
Cool, thank you. So, have you had any recent, since you're the vendor on the panel here, can you give us any examples of people moving from old traditional broadcast to cloud?
We do work with multiple TV stations to do the transformations, digital transformation. We have, for instance, LBCI TV, whereby we have done a major transformation, and they have moved to the SVOD model for their business, and they are uploading all their content back to the cloud and doing the full platform. So for us, we see the cloud from a different perspective, whereby we move the broadcaster from the local TV station to the cloud TV station. It's not something done by magic. It's a lot of integrations done to be able to achieve this step.
And is it usually one main software stack, I guess, from the broadcast to the SVOD, or is it a number of different technologies involved?
Excuse me, I'm not able to hear. There is a lot of echo.
Yeah, it is a bit dodgy to hear. Is it? What I was asking, if it's one main software stack that you use when you transform these vendors, or is it multiple technologies? Because you mentioned integration as well.
Okay. What we did is we built QuickMotion platform, and we integrated the functions of QuickMotion with multiple cloud services. For instance, the AI functions to transform speech to text and do the translation. We're using, for example, IBM Watson and Google Vision at the same time. So what we are doing is helping the client achieve whatever he wants to do a task easier in a single platform. So this is whereby we do a lot of integrations with multiple cloud, because there is no single cloud that can provide you the whole service, and it's not something like magic. You just sign up and it's done. It's not that easy.
And why? So you mentioned multiple clouds and I assume hybrid cloud then. So you've got customers on different clouds. So it's AWS, there's Google, there's IBM. Who's the other one? Microsoft, Azure. Sorry, Microsoft.
Yep.
Are you saying that within the same transformation, in the same vendor, they are already on a hybrid cloud strategy? They've got bits of software and services sitting on one cloud and something else within the same service sitting on another cloud?
It's really hard to hear.
Can't hear.
It's really hard to hear the questions.
Okay. Hybrid cloud,
Okay.
that's what we're talking about here, right? So the one on IBM, the speech recognition project.
Yeah, true. It's the hybrid cloud model that we're achieving.
And then you're using another cloud as well on the same project.
Yeah, it's not only a single cloud service that we are using. We're using multiple clouds for redundancy, for backups, for different services. It's not a single one that can achieve all the tasks.
Okay, because that's quite a feat, hybrid cloud, especially for software and services. Hybrid cloud, we usually have CDNs on multiple clouds, if you would. But software and services, that's quite an achievement. As I'm going to ask these guys now, MVC, Shahid, is there anything you have on hybrid cloud when it comes to software and services, other than CDN?
Yeah, so we have all of the clouds. We have the best clouds. Our clouds are magnificent. I would love to say that, if you're talking about multi-cloud, for instance, I would love to say that, so the actual strategy would be where you say, you move from on-premise service, you take them into cloud, usually sort of like the lift and ship kind of thing where it's one-to-one, basically going, I need this number of CPUs and memory, and so I will now install this on Amazon or whatever. From there, you can take it in two directions, which is either you start containerizing those services and run it in a more modern way, but in essence, you're still running virtual servers, or you go more in a function as a service kind of direction with serverless and a lot of managed services. What Google and Microsoft obviously now are trying to do is take those servers, get them virtualized, get them on cloud virtualized, get them containerized, and then offer services to run containers across multiple clouds and on-premise, etc. What we're trying to do in Shahid is move more into the managed services and the FaaS kind of setup with serverless. In reality, when I say we have all the clouds, not all of that was strategy. I mean, let's be real about this. A lot of the cases, it's we used email marketing system, it was bought by IBM, and suddenly we are on the Watson Marketing Cloud. We use Google Analytics, which is now slowly migrating into Firebase, and then you have to run queries on this, and suddenly you are buying into the Google Cloud. All of our backends and our own software was running on Amazon, but our video is now running on Microsoft. So a lot of this organically moved into a multi-cloud strategy, which is not nearly as clean as what you would say, read in an article about, oh, this is the new trend, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, on-premise, etc. Real-life setups are never that clean. And so outside of this room, I wouldn't want to shout too loud about this, like where actually it's accidental. Let's stick to it. It was a very conscious strategy to use everybody. And leave it at that.
It was totally by accident. Yeah. For us, you got something to add?
So for hybrid cloud, like everyone wants to hear these kind of, like fancy jargons where, yeah, we are fully hybrid. But let's step back towards fundamentals of your apps, your workloads that you have been having. Think about them as well. Are they fully hybrid cloud adaptable? That's one of the first questions where I usually ask all the apps, because not all the apps can work in hybrid environment, because you still need to have some sort of some sort of modularization in your apps where apps should be able to perform in case my resource pool of Google, for example, is out of I don't have enough resource pool for that particular container app that is running between two different clouds. One. And what about the reachability? For example, in UAE, at this particular time, all of my traffic going towards AWS because availability and reachability is perfect, latency is optimized, Do they have enough resource pools available to adopt this kind of scale that have been that's being pushed toward that cloud? So to me, one of the important things that when we talk about hybrid cloud, you have to factor all those components in, all the bottlenecks in, where resource pooling, your key metrics when you're shifting the traffic towards those clouds, whether it's scalability or availability or throughput availability. And based on those factors, then you have to have some sort of a management layer as well, where you can easily manage and the Dockerization or orchestration of those Dockers between different clouds, because that's another challenge after that for a DevOps. Oh, my this cloud is working perfectly fine without having any issues, but the other one is still struggling to get the resource pool available. And then, so once we have that, and then you're going to come towards the stage where I can see, okay, what's the percentage of traffic being served very well with the right KPIs for this particular cloud, but not from this particular cloud. So that's one approach, dynamic approach to while adopting a hybrid cloud. The other approach is to have some standalone workloads running out of different clouds. Maybe some offline cloud workloads can be run out of for example Oracle or Google, because we can afford to have those kind of latency metrics for that particular region or for that particular request. But for the 100% interactivity, you might need to have only AWS. So that's another approach usually people take. But again, that's not a typical hybrid cloud implementation, because that's still a multi-cloud environment where you have some of the workloads running in one cloud, other workloads are running in other cloud.
And are these processes normally what we used to call back office, or not online? So there's less risk of operational risk, I guess, if it's not a live streaming service, whether it's data streaming or it's video streaming, or these processes you're talking about. And I'll ask the same question to everyone. Is your experience that these are back office, offline processes?
Basically, for us, we started on the cloud initially, and we were experienced very well on the cloud. So everything we do happens on the cloud. For video processing, we have done a lot of work to have it extremely fast and extremely nice. And I believe we have an advantage on the cloud whereby we can do parallel processing, with something that you have a limit to do when you are on premises.
But for video processing, are you doing the processing over multiple clouds at the same time for the same video file, or is it per video file? Some video files are going towards this cloud, and the other ones are going to the other one.
We're doing the processing on a local server, then we're pushing the content on different cloud systems.
That's fine. Well, so that means the processing is still on a standalone, because logically you can't have two different containers sitting and doing the same video file assets processing between different clouds, because that's something is going to give you wrong fragmentation, wrong syncing while packaging the files.
No, I mean, we are able to process, for example, 100 videos at a time.
Got it.
And later on, when we're done, we can push them, since we are able to launch multiple instances at the same time.
That's exactly what I was trying to explain as well. Like, yeah, again, hybrid, it's very easy to say. But the real hybrid is something which is not easy to achieve as well, because, yeah, you might have your standalone process running in different clouds, but that's not a real hybrid. Hybrid means that my one process of the same app is running on this cloud, the other one is on the other cloud.
Yeah.
If I can add something,
Yep.
allow me, for example, to give you during the months of Ramadan.
Yep.
During the months of Ramadan, everybody ingests at the same time their episodes. We have something like 90 broadcasters, so if we have 90 episodes ingested at the same time. If we were not on the cloud, we couldn't process
Absolutely.
all those data.
Yep, that's scalability.
Okay, so I guess there's some cost implications here, or positives, I should say. So if we're moving our infrastructure off of on-prem, that's hardware that we've owned, and into the cloud and multiple clouds, then what are the immediate benefits that we get from that? Cost-wise, I can hear it already, but are there other things that you see, other workflow efficiencies, any process efficiencies, time-wise? Does that all come down by multiples?
I think in some cases, if people actually run the math on a business case, and you're literally looking at, I've got these servers, I now want the same instances on cloud, sometimes it's not actually that much of a gain. And if you're looking at, oh, we can save 10%, but it's going to cost us a multiple of that, then why bother? But where we're really starting to see the benefits is if you're doing massive processing. So the kind of stuff that we're now doing for recommendations, where we're very happy to be able to be paying by the second, which I think is one of those optimizations which is the hardest to achieve, and then using the cheaper periods of times as well. Because at a certain stage, and same as with video processing, etc., if you have more or less unlimited hardware you can use, and you can do the math, like, okay, we can use one server and do this in 100 hours, or we can use 10 servers and do it in 10 hours, and it's going to cost the same, it's just going to be 10 times as fast. Those are the real benefits more than just a simple cost equation. Because if you go for very cheap hardware that you just consider to be disposable and you just keep a lot of spares, you could probably do it a lot cheaper than even the large cloud providers, even with all of the discounts. That isn't really the reason. The real reason is that it gives you that kind of peak scalability that you wouldn't get on-premise, because nobody would be installing that much compute power for only once a day.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're in a unique situation where you have a fully cloud-based infrastructure, but there's also the broadcast side as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of making the case for broadcast there. You have legacy hardware, but the efficiencies gained by going to the cloud pretty much straight away would far outweigh the costs of maintaining and keeping that, and you can probably sell that off in a short space of time. So why isn't that side of the business moving to cloud faster?
I think if you'd ask our COO...
is he here?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
You can ask him later.
All right.
If you would ask him, he would say, I would want to move almost everything to cloud tomorrow. The only reason we don't is because we need massive bandwidth, because it's a media company, so you need very fast connections that are reasonably affordable. So we don't mind paying money for this, but you need multiple 10 gigabit, and basically what we can get is multiple 1 gigabit, which means that it's just not fast enough. Then latency is the same problem. If you want to do video editing, it has to be really extremely fast. So if you're working on a cloud region in Virginia, and you have like half a second of delay, all of your editors are going to run out in protest and not come back. So those two things are what have kept us from going completely in on cloud, because again, if you ask our COO, he loves hardware, he's a geek, he doesn't actually want to run it. And that's just not really what, as a broadcaster, we should be doing, and as Shad, what we should be doing.
And are these cloud vendors not selling you those services? Because they've certainly tried to sell us real-time editing in the cloud, even video editing in the cloud.
This works very well if you're very close to, in internet terms, close to your cloud provider, which is the case in Europe and in the US, where this is very easy to do. But in the Middle East, it's still a matter of, well, basically there's only one or two, let's say three clouds you could use.
Please jump in.
I have a question for you. Don't you think the cloud helps you filter the lazy members of the team? Because they cannot leave their trashes anymore on the cloud. They need to do always clean up. They need to be always up to date. They cannot leave machines on.
It's a tough learning school, because you want to use the flexibility of cloud, which means that you want to allow people in the team to take ownership of jobs that are running there. And you tell them, look, make actual use of the fact that this is cloud and not a server under your desk. So you can spin up 10 instances, 100 instances, and I trust you to get it right. It also means that we have several monitoring services for cost and performance, where every once in a while I pick up the phone and sort of go, yeah, so this cluster with 768 CPUs, are you still using it? Because if not, can you please turn it off? Because if you pay by the second, it also means that the seconds you're not using it, you're just wasting money.
Yep.
Exactly.
So that's, with the hybrid, one of the main factors is how to manage the cost, because everything is going smooth. The moment your cloud gets scared, things have changed. I mean, your budgets has gone up wrong, right? So some threshold needs to be set up where you should know what kind of workloads I'm running out of each cloud, what kinds of pricing that I'm talking about. It's still a challenge to me, and I believe it's the same with every factor where your cost cannot be controlled, especially when it comes to the real audience hitting your services that you're offering and the kind of scalability that we're having towards different clouds. So the cost management is really, really important, and that should be, I think, tackled within seconds. That you're going to say, like, I mean, you can't just wait for about 5 minutes and let's see, it will come down again, because the pooling gets shifted very fast, but the moment it's going to drain back, it's going to take a while. It's not immediate, because you also have to maintain the experience that you're having in the services.
But I think the main thing to keep in mind, though, is that initially you can do these optimizations, you can make advantage of being able to scale very quickly. So there is some cost savings, there is the speed benefits, etc. But eventually, it's not really going to decrease the amount of money you spend on these technologies. It just means that you find new ways to actually optimize your business and do stuff that 10 years ago we couldn't even be thinking about. That were just not an option, too expensive, too difficult to achieve. All of us are now talking about analyzing video streams for metadata and, transcription and things like that. 10 years ago, that was still science fiction. So it's not so much about massively decreasing cost, it's about becoming a more competitive business. And I think in the next 5 years, we'll start clearly seeing that companies who don't embrace this kind of change and constant innovation are going to be lagging very far behind, and almost to a level that it will be impossible to catch up.
Innovate or die, huh?
I want to add something. Cost is not always money only. There is also the time, which is cost.
Yeah.
Cost is not only by paying money, there is also being the first to publish, being the first to have access for the audience to watch you. So I don't know if you agree somehow, especially from a broadcasting background, that sometimes you need to be faster than the other to publish to keep the pace. So this is very important, and you need the cloud to achieve that.
Yeah, I believe that's exactly what the definition of cost, which we are following as well. It's just not the money; it's time, resource, efforts that you're putting in to get it up. So yeah, but what I'm also seeing in today's world, where all public cloud providers as well, they're also transforming as well towards the pricing that all these kind of like heavy intensive resource broadcasters that need, because I think they have realized, and they're still realizing that that's not the way forward going to be, because at some stage a big broadcaster will or may think that I might need to have something off the cloud. Maybe I might have another my own private cloud where I can control the cost, because it needs to transform not only from the operations wise, but also from the vendor wise, from the vendors as well, where they should realize, okay, what kind of packages that we have been pushing towards these broadcasters for this kind of heavy resource.
Yeah. What about, so are you using your cloud instances as they've been sold to you, as prescribed, or have you had to put in workarounds in order to get your workflows, your processes working, in order to justify using the cloud, if you would? Is there anything you're doing different outside, thinking even further outside the box than just being on the cloud to get it to work for you? Anything that you've had to augment?
I think that definitely on the Shahid side of things. So if 7, 8 years ago, we were using this fairly old school web content management system and built a lot of stuff around this. Which is just a Java system with a database behind it to store all of the content. And I see the same thing currently on the broadcast tech side. So you have these systems that were never built to run on thousands of instances that elastically scale as the loads increase. And basically, all of the ways you try to then make it scale and adapt this to cloud environments are sort of hacks. And this is why people are still joking about things like, oh, there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. And this is where I sort of go, well, then you fundamentally don't get what they should be doing for you. And that's the difficulty in taking existing systems and migrating them to cloud. In some cases, though, I'm perfectly happy with this because I've had a couple of licenses that were based on a per server instance, and they had never thought through that one server could have 96 cores. And so sometimes it works in your advantage. Mostly it's just very visible that the software companies, the tools we work with, still have to make that transition themselves.
Yeah.
So one of the use cases that I had back in 3-4 years, where I offloaded a lot of traffic out of my public cloud origin because of many factors. One, obviously the cost. Second, the performance, which was the main point for any startup service provider, where all experience is all about everyone is talking about. So because at that particular time, the nearest POPs weren't available in this region. We were fetching streams somewhere out of Europe or maybe Asia. So the performance, even for the CDNs, they're literally here. They were having issues while pulling the feeds because my packaging was on a next level where we were not doing like a typical standard kind of packaging where we have packages for each and every stream type and pushing towards cloud. We were literally doing just-in-time packaging, and those kind of issues, those kind of scenarios, triggered us to have our own origin sitting somewhere in this region, and then start complementing these public CDN as well. So that's how one of the use cases that I did as well, and it went very well, which eventually turned on to our own private CDN.
Very good. Sorry?
Next.
Sorry, what?
I was actually just thinking back to your original point. It's like, why are we still here talking about cloud? And realized that I think last year or the year before, a lot of the panels here and everywhere else were about blockchain. I checked the program today. I didn't actually see blockchain, and most of the programs of conferences don't really have it anymore, which made me think back to past buzzwords. And I remember years ago when everything had to be XML and so on. And probably one of the reasons that we're still talking about cloud is because it's here to stay. It's not a fad, it's not a hype that we read about for a couple of years, talk about extensively, don't really understand what it is, and then we move on to the next thing. We may come up with new names for it, we may start being a bit more specific about what kind of cloud we're actually talking about, because cloud as a whole is just such a broad thing. But we'll be talking about this the next 10 years. It's not a fad, and that's why we're still here.
I guess it's even less. There are TV stations in Spain that have totally moved to the cloud, including the broadcast, everything. They don't have anything anymore on premises.
Yeah. So which, I think we've got all the cloud vendors that I mentioned earlier here. What do they need to hear? Which ones are your preferences or your favorites, the ones that work for you for capacity-wise, closeness, the number of services on there? If you were to leave the audience here with some inspiration and thoughts on who to speak to next, who would that be? Which cloud vendor would that be for you?
Amazon have a lot of services. It's biggest one currently. Each one has an advantage, pros and cons. For example, IBM in terms of storage and speed, it's one of the best, especially that it combines additional to the virtual servers, bare metal servers, which are the dedicated servers. Azure, honestly, we didn't have any positive experience with them. Google is impressive on the CPU. You can, for less number of CPUs, have a better performance. So each one has a preference depending on what is the activities that you want to achieve.
Okay. For us?
Again, it depends which industry you're in first, and what do you need to get all of these clouds, because these clouds are not just infrastructures anymore. They have a lot of platforms as a service, they have a lot of managed services, they have a huge marketplace where you can adopt those kind of partners that you want to choose. So my answer will be always it's going to be you have to do your exercise, what kind of workloads that you are trying to run on, what kind of managed services that you want to, because what I sometimes heard from my peers, where we moved to cloud because we had those services as managed services from these cloud providers, which is good for you because you don't have to manage them anymore and you might not have those skills. That's where they're complementing as well, especially when it comes to AWS.
So who's your cloud then?
For me, I will still go with AWS because not just because they have a lot of services available as a managed, because that's something which we have started adopting, but when it comes to the scalability and the overall performance, because now they are expanding they have already expanded in Bahrain, plus the kind of footprint that they have, because when you want to measure cloud, you have to measure from all the angles: resource pooling, CPUs, scalability, performance, the network peering as well. What is the last mile end user is going to get out of these clouds? Because that's something which we always
That's an
forget.
entirely different conversation for the last mile. I think telco's in the room.
Exactly.
So basically you're inviting Microsoft and Google and these guys to come speak to you afterwards? Okay. He's on LinkedIn too, you can find him. Adrian, last word.
Is there somebody here from Microsoft, actually?
I don't know, actually.
No?
I haven't seen them.
Or from Google? No, so I can
Amazon.
safely
I
agree
think
that,
I know from Amazon.
From Amazon.
Yeah. Amazon is far ahead of most of the other cloud providers in terms of managed services and serverless, to the point where our dev teams basically joke that having to move something to Microsoft is punishment. That's a bit extreme. I think it depends how far you are in a cloud journey. If you really want to be on the cutting edge, that's with Amazon. But for very specific purposes, and especially if you're just containerizing things, Microsoft and Google are very good options to consider, and maybe a combination of them. And I think that's those considerations are more important than the actual cost and so on. It's also a corporate fit, right? Microsoft does a lot of enterprise hand-holding. Amazon is much more of a knowledge transfer. We teach you how to use it, and Google is sort of like, but of course you would want to try this. So it's very much what fits with your corporate culture.
And that brings back to the same hybrid approach that we have been trying to take, because we know AWS is one, and there are some other cloud providers which might have other offline processes which might not be interacting with your customers.
I think you guys are going to have to explain to people when they come up to you afterwards what containers are, and containerization and virtualization.
It's like those cases from Nico.
All right, very good. I think
I was saying that I guess in a nutshell, Amazon is the leading in the cloud.
Yeah.
So to conclude.